Naveen, thank you so much for joining us. You're sort of an inspiration to me, many entrepreneurs in India. Just sort of wanted to acknowledge the fact that you are the person who sort of triggered this series for us.
No, first of all, thank you for, I feel I've self-invited myself to this talk show, and thank you for calling me onto this.
Most people know about InMobi very, very well, but I know there's this new avatar of InMobi that is very, very exciting. And, a lot of the young generation is sort of using your consumer products now. InMobi has always been looked at as a B2B company, but now there's a heavy consumer play. And this is a massive transformation because I know you were M-Coach when you started.
Yes.
You were in Bombay, you were in telecom, SMS, literally that was the market that you were in a decade back.
Yes.
And now you're sort of literally the app screen of every individual out there, which is a crazy transformation.
Very recently, we announced the transformation of InMobi into an InMobi group, first of all, which now has 3 companies underneath it, and all of those 3 companies have evolved over the last few years, and are now at a scale and stage where there is a dedicated. They need to be dedicated companies with dedicated management teams, and they're part of their own. So the 3 companies underneath InMobi Group now one is InMobi Marketing Cloud, which is what we started off with. It's our advertising and marketing business, doing quite well. We recently launched a B2C company called Glance, which we started almost 3 years ago. It is, I think, the 3rd largest B2C platform in India today. And third is a data platform that we launched called True Factor. It's a platform for data scientists, and it's intelligence as a service that we are providing because we fundamentally believe that in this wide world, if you think about private enterprises have required, financial capital, human capital, technological resources, etc. And there have been industries after industries that have, gone and created. You're part of one of those industries within the human resource component. I think the future enterprises require intelligence as a resource. So True Factor is effectively, providing intelligence to enterprises because the future of any enterprise has to be very, very different. And all of these 3 companies, obviously we started off with the InMobi Marketing Cloud. The other 2 are things that, we have worked over the past few years internally, never thinking about them as that they would become what they are today. And that's what innovation is all about. You don't know where they're headed, but you have to essentially start that off, and then they take shapes and sizes that you can never fathom. So if one were to ask me 3 years ago, would we have 3 companies, I would have absolutely said no. Even a year and a half ago, that would there be True Factor, I would have said no. And a lot of these things evolve and take shape, and that's the power of innovation, and that's, I think, what we try to do a lot at InMobi. Now as a group, at a group level, we try to do this a lot, and it seems to work. And I have a lot of pride because we do this level of innovation from India, and we feel, and it's all technological innovation. It's not capital. It's not a capital-centric innovation. It is actually fundamental technological design innovation that happens, and I take a lot of pride in saying that talent in India is actually doing so.
Since you brought up this point about Glance sort of just happening from within, right?
Yeah.
It was it wasn't something that you were thinking of or brainstorming on, and now it's become like one unit of the InMobi group, which is crazy. And the story in parallel obviously is the WeChat story, right? Where WeChat actually just came out of internal competition between teams trying to sort of figure out social gaming for the Tencent group. And
the same is true for AWS.
And for AWS.
Which has become larger than what Amazon is today, right?
No,
or
absolutely.
Amazon retail
absolutely. So actually, when I talk about this, some of these examples to some of our customers and partners in the journey, sometimes it's difficult for them to understand how is this even possible? Like how can 1 or 2 people randomly somewhere within a 5,000 member team or a 2,000 member team come up with something which sort of becomes the core business. And if you can sort of just break that down, I really think it'll be super helpful for a lot of CEOs who are sort of trying to transform their companies.
There is no massive science behind this, by the way. I think if one were to try and put, logical, programs around this, it's actually not going to work because by definition, it's not logical. By definition, it is not predictable. That's why it's called innovation, right? Yeah. What is predictable is an approach to innovation. We are all running decently large enterprises, and there has to be a certain portion of our resources, call it 1% to 5% of our resources, that should go towards what I call, sowing the seeds. We have this model of 60, 30, 10. What we have done is we said, look, 60% of our resources always go behind what is here and now.
Interesting.
Current revenue, current business, current set of customers. 30% goes after what we can see, which is called predictable innovation. And the 5 to 10% of our resources were always put behind things that we just didn't know what they were going to do. And we now feel very excited about this, and we want to now continue this process. So therefore, the predictability is in the process now.
How can a company have a flavor of culture of people doing B2B, enterprise or consumer or retail or FMCG? And like in this technology world, technically, companies like Amazon, InMobi are basically now literally breaking those barriers, right? Because you're consumer, you're a data science company, you're a technology company, you're a global company. And in many times, a lot of these companies that are sort of really transforming themselves are thinking, do I even have the right culture and the right DNA to even have basically 2 or 3 of these infused together and succeed?
I actually fundamentally believe that a lot of our corporate HR practices were built not for innovation. They were built for predictable execution, which was built in the era of industrialization, where it was about ensuring that, factory workers came on time, did the job that they were expected to do, and did little harder because they could achieve more.
Yeah.
They're not built for an era where rapid innovation is actually very possible, right? So industries change in less than 5 years, and you have to stay with it. And, I always talk about this within the company is that 7-8 years ago, we had a different set of competitors. 5 years ago, we had a different set of competitors. Today, we have a different set of competitors. We are still there, and we are growing. At every point of time, you have to be agile enough to say, I can reinvent myself.
Right.
Now, that is a mindset which has to be in the system. Look, this whole predictability is just overrated. And predictability, by the way, is a very important thing. But the predictability in terms of, hey, I want to know what you would do next quarter is this kind of forecasting is just anti-innovative. How can an engineer sit there and tell you, this is what I'm going to achieve in the next 3 or 6 months? When you want him to go ahead and build something which is different. When you want him to go and take the shot at something which is slightly bigger. Because by design, if you ask him this thing to say, can you make sure that you're going to hit that? By design, you've just killed the innovation there by saying, if you do not, what is the unsaid there is, if you do not, I will see I will see you in 6 months. We in fact are absolutely okay in people failing, which does not mean that, I may not be in the camp of saying that we celebrate failures, but we are okay with failures because you are trying something new.
Yeah.
So I can't hold you suddenly responsible for a failure of that nature. And all of those people, by the way, who have tried these things, have failed, are massively successful at the company right now. The thing to watch out for there is the intent with which they have gone ahead and tried those things, because the intent matters. And I think that's where the culture starts to kick in to say, is the intent there to say, I'm going to try and make this work? Oh my God, it didn't work out because of 10 other reasons.
Yeah.
And I think that's been something that we have worked on hard. People are not afraid here to try big things and fail. But I also know whenever people try these big things, there are few successes, and those are just...
I'm aware of that. There are a lot of founders who come out of InMobi who basically want to start companies. And interestingly, what Naveen and InMobi do is that they basically give their office space to them, like for free, if I'm correct, and ask them to sort of be here with no equity, with nothing literally, and just ask them to sort of just come and try their companies. And if it works, great. Naveen obviously supports them and InMobi supports them. But if it doesn't, then there's a chance for them to just come back and join the company.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a super brave decision. And, we still haven't seen anyone do it, actually. What sort of just led you to even think of something so radical?
Look, I think there are two, three, things that kind of matter in this. I think one is, if you want to attract the best people, then those best people will want to do greater things in life. And that's the human evolution.
It's a reality.
Yes. And you can try and hold that reality back for a while, but it's going to have its course. Let's care for people, genuinely. And that meant many things for us. By the way, it meant professional growth. It also meant family, right? Their families. If somebody genuinely wants to go ahead and start something, then I might as well support it. Because if he succeeds, it's great because he's part of the family. If they don't succeed in what they were trying to do, you tell them to come back. And if you would ask me, why am I confident about InMobi and InMobi Group over the next, many, many decades, is because of this, is to say, look, I think there are people around us who truly care for us, and they care for us and therefore will do well.
In all of this journey, I think your recent most leadership, especially on the people function side, are not typical leaders from the normal people function fraternity, and must be an important call for you to take, because the company is at this very interesting juncture. Why did you take that call, and two, how are you amplifying this trust at this scale, at these many geographies, at these many different levels?
One has to somewhere sit and say, what's important to you? That culture and how we deal with our people is probably one of the most important things that I could do. It's the least talked about component in the boardrooms. It's the most talked about component when the two CEOs meet. Okay, so that basically means there is some dichotomy there, right? So the drivers of success that the CEO thinks versus that the boardroom thinks are not aligned. But that's okay. That shouldn't stop the CEO from doing what's right.
Yeah.
If you think about that as an important driver, then you say, okay, if it's one of the most important things, then I should give it to the guy I trust the most. You kind of go around and, philosophically, you have to believe that life is not about skills. It's about attitude. It's about your trust in people. It's about your, their trust back into you. And so I gave it to Sahil, and he's done a phenomenal job in the last, year and a half that he's been at the helm of it. And prior to that, I held it, by the way, because they wouldn't give it out to people that you can't really trust.
Yeah.
And because it's the most core thing for the company to give it out to somebody, and so you only give it out to people that you could trust, and therefore, it was not the decision-making criteria was not about, hey, is he coming from business background? That's why no, it's not that. Why should I give it to him because he's not coming from the fraternity? No, that's not. It is, who do you trust with the most important thing that you have? That's the criteria, and so you kind of give it out.
You've always thought of technology, scaling, experiences, etc. I know there have been a bunch of interesting things InMobi's done on the people side.
I actually like to use technology to do less processes, right? And I think people confuse the fact that I'm going to invest in technology to create more forms and more processes and more checks and balances. And I think one has to figure out how to use technology to do the right things. For example, I'm a big believer in how one should use artificial intelligence to essentially do talent acquisition, talent identification, and talent growth. When it comes to learning and development, I'm no more a big believer in just skill enhancement. I'm a big believer in mind enhancement. We stay away from too many onerous processes, and we really think focusing on the mind is one of the biggest things that we could do to enhance the care for our people, growth for our people, and therefore that's what we spend a lot of time on now.
That's fascinating. I'd love to sort of finish it on this note in particular, because I haven't heard this from too many CEOs out there. I hope it helps a lot of other CEOs to think through how they're about building their organization. And really grateful that Naveen's joined us on this conversation. Naveen, I can already sense that this is going to be one of the most absorbing conversations for most people to see on the series.
Thank you, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.